In the hushed pre-dawn hours of ancient Rome, the city lies cloaked in shadows, its usual clamor replaced by a tense stillness. Within the opulent confines of a patrician villa, the orchestrator of tonight's grand convivium, the esteemed banquet planner, awakens to a day brimming with anticipation and meticulous preparation. This role, far from mere logistics, is a delicate dance of social strategy, where every detail, from the hue of rose petals to the arrangement of reclining couches, holds the potential to elevate or tarnish reputations. The planner's responsibilities encompass coordinating a symphony of elements, ensuring the freshest delicacies from distant provinces arrive timely, selecting entertainers who can captivate the elite audience, and navigating the intricate web of guest dynamics to prevent any social faux pas. A misstep, such as serving less than fresh oysters or misplacing a senator's favored seat, could ripple through the echelons of power, making the planner's role both pivotal and perilous. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa Oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. As the sun ascends, casting golden hues over terracotta rooftops, the villa transforms into a hive of activity. Servants bustle about, draping luxurious fabrics, arranging exotic fruits, and rehearsing performances that blend music, poetry, and acrobatics. The planner, ever vigilant, oversees each task, ensuring that the ambience exudes both grandeur and intimacy. Guests of varied stature, senators, philosophers, artists, and courtesans, begin to arrive, each bearing their own expectations and egos. The planner's acute awareness of past rivalries and alliances informs seating arrangements and conversational pairings, aiming to foster harmony and stimulate engaging discourse. The evening unfolds as a testament to Roman sophistication, where culinary artistry and intellectual exchange intertwine, all under the watchful eye of the planner who navigates the event's undercurrents with finesse. As twilight deepens into night, the villa's atmosphere becomes increasingly vibrant. Laughter mingles with the melodies of lyres, and the aroma of spiced delicacies wafts through the air. The planner remains ever present, subtly adjusting elements to maintain the evening's momentum. A discreet word to a musician here, a gentle prompt to a servant there, each action ensures the seamless progression of the banquet. Unexpected challenges, such as a spilled goblet or a brewing disagreement, are deftly managed, preserving the event's elegance. The planner's expertise lies not only in preparation but in adaptability, transforming potential disruptions into opportunities for enhanced engagement. Through this dynamic stewardship, the banquet transcends mere festivity, becoming a microcosm of Roman societal interplay and the planner's masterful orchestration. As the first light of dawn filters through the villa's ornate windows, signaling the banquet's conclusion, the planner reflects on the night's triumphs and tribulations. Guests depart, their conversations filled with praise and memorable anecdotes, unaware of the intricate choreography that underpinned their experience. The planner, though weary, takes solace in the successful navigation of complex social terrains and the creation of an event that will be recounted in Rome's forums and atriums. This role, demanding both strategic acumen and creative vision, epitomizes the blend of art and diplomacy essential to Roman high society. In the quiet aftermath, the planner begins to contemplate the next gathering, ever mindful of the evolving tapestry of relationships and expectations that define their craft. If this exploration into the nuanced world of Roman banquet planning has intrigued you, consider subscribing for more insights into the intricacies of ancient societies. Your engagement fuels our journey through history's rich tapestry. Share your thoughts and let us know which aspects of Roman culture you'd like to delve into next. Together, let's continue to uncover the stories that have shaped our world. Imagine yourself sitting in a grand Roman villa, surrounded by marble columns, flickering oil lamps, and the soft sounds of a harpist playing in the background. The air is thick with the aromas of exotic spices, roasted meats, and freshly baked bread. You're about to experience a Roman banquet, an event that was much more than just a meal. In ancient Rome, a banquet, known as a convivium, was a symbol of power, wealth, and status. It was a performance of opulence where hosts would impress their guests not only with food, but also with lavish surroundings and captivating entertainment. The most powerful citizens of Rome, senators, generals, and even emperors, used banquets as a way to solidify alliances, display their influence, and, sometimes, to humiliate their rivals by flaunting their superiority in the most extravagant ways imaginable. A typical Roman banquet would begin in the late afternoon, after the day's work had ended. The guests, always carefully selected, would arrive dressed in their finest tunics and stolas, greeted at the door by slaves who would wash their hands and sometimes even their feet. They would then be escorted into the triclinium, the dining room, where the furniture layout itself spoke volumes. 3 couches, arranged in a U-shape, surrounded a low table laden with dishes. The best seat, called the locus consularis, was reserved for the guest of honor, while others were seated according to rank. Reclining on their left elbows, with their right hands free for eating, guests would prepare for an evening of indulgence. The atmosphere was intentionally designed to impress. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, bronze and silver vessels reflected the candlelight, and perfumed oils filled the air. The meal itself was a feast of excess. The first course, or gusttatio, might include eggs, olives, and a variety of salads. But this was just the beginning. The prima mensa, or main course, could feature an astonishing array of dishes: whole roasted pigs stuffed with sausages, peacocks with their feathers reattached for display, exotic seafood like moray eels or flamingos, and even dormice seasoned with honey and poppy seeds. Wine flowed freely, often mixed with honey or herbs, and it was customary to toast the health of the host and the emperor. The secunda mensa, or dessert, brought fruits, nuts, and sweet cakes. And throughout the evening, musicians, poets, dancers, and acrobats would entertain the guests, ensuring that the night was an unforgettable spectacle of Roman grandeur. Now, let's address a common myth that has long fascinated and puzzled people: the vomitorium. Many imagine that, in the midst of all this indulgence, Roman diners would leave the table, go into a special room called the vomitorium, and deliberately vomit to make space for more food. But this is a complete misunderstanding of history. The word vomitorium does exist, but it has nothing to do with feasting or vomiting food. In reality, a vomitorium was an architectural feature in Roman amphitheaters, like the Colosseum. It was a passageway or corridor designed to allow large crowds to exit quickly, literally spewing out people into the streets, not food onto the floor. The confusion likely comes from the Latin verb vomere, which means to spew out. So while Romans certainly ate to excess, they didn't have special rooms for purging during banquets. That image comes from later misunderstandings and modern myths. The idea of a dedicated room for vomiting during a feast might make for a dramatic story, but it's simply not true. In fact, Roman banquets were about endurance and discipline in the face of abundance. Guests were expected to pace themselves, savor the flavors, and show restraint, even as they enjoyed an over-the-top feast. Vomiting did happen occasionally, but it was considered bad manners and a sign of weakness. The true spectacle was in the ability to indulge without losing control. So, the next time you hear someone mention the vomitorium, remember, it wasn't a secret room for gluttony, but a clever piece of Roman architecture for managing crowds. And Roman banquets? They were a theater of power, a stage where food, wealth, and status came together in a dazzling display of excess. They were designed to impress, to shock, and to remind everyone present of who held the keys to the empire. No one will swap them out, you know they will, but at least you tried. If the orgy is a performance, the kitchen is the backstage arena, and it smells like fire. Figs and sheer panic in the mid-afternoon. The entire house is a controlled cooking choreography of chaos. The head cook, an ex-Navy chef turned domestic warlord, is already screaming at a terrified assistant about the proper ratio of stuffing for roasted dormice. From the dormitory, you hear the words, dear poppy seeds, or I'll personally throw him into the Tiber. Excellent, everything is on schedule. Tonight's main attraction, roasted peacock, feathers reattached for dramatic flair. It looks magnificent, tastes like shoe leather, and is mostly served so wealthy guests can boast about chewing on something that once strutted like a diva. The kitchen is also preparing a pig stuffed with live birds. Yes, that's a real thing. You slice the pig open at the table, and surprise doves fly out. It's stunning, disturbing, and only slightly traumatic for the doves. Platters of figs, dates, and honey cakes decorate the counters. A pastry in the shape of the Colosseum is being glazed. A slave accidentally eats part of it. He's swiftly reassigned to grape-picking duties in the corner. Someone stirs a vat of garum, the infamous Roman fish sauce made from fermented anchovies and the tears of anyone within smelling range. You remind them loudly to keep it away from the bread. Last month, a garum-soaked loaf caused a 5-day brawl between two magistrates. As the wine storage is organized, amphorae are labeled discreetly. Premium vintages for the main guests, cheaper ones for those who can't tell the difference. You've been burned before, literally, by a consul's tantrum over a sensitive palate. Every corner of the kitchen vibrates with tension. Sauces reduced, meats polished, pastry horns filled with mysteries. You are everywhere at once, sniffing, tasting, directing. You are not just managing a meal. You are orchestrating an edible spectacle that must impress, intoxicate, and survive being flung across the room during a heated debate. As you pass the oven, the head cook barks, "If anyone drops another dormouse, I'm feeding them to the peacock." You nod. Things are going well. You'd think selecting a fragrance would be easy, but in ancient Rome, perfume is a statement. And tonight's orgy is no place for amateur choices. The guests won't just taste and see the opulence, they must smell it. The air must whisper of wealth, temptation, and the kind of confidence only possessed by people who bathe in imported rose oil. You descend into the storage chamber, where small alabaster jars line the shelves like sacred relics. Myrrh from Arabia, cinnamon oil from Ceylon, saffron from Cilicia, and an experimental blend called Nile lotus essence, which smells like an expensive lake. You've smelled everyone twice. You begin composing the fragrance strategy like a battle plan. In the atrium, a citrus and cedar blend with a fresh, clean opening. The main triclinium will feature heavier scents. Myrrh, frankincense, a hint of musk, that should whisper, "You can make a mistake tonight, and that's okay." The private garden alcoves, where secrets will be exchanged and togas accidentally misplaced, get a seductive mix of rose, cinnamon, and spikenard. Just enough to make someone faint if they get too close. Then there are the perfumed oils for guests' hands and feet. You assign an attendant to warm them gently. No one wants cold oil. Cold oil is for barbarians. Warm oil is for seduction, good lighting, and, yes, you even scented the latrines. You're not a barbarian either. You instruct your team, don't overdo it. We want luxury, not suffocation. If a senator walks in and blames the smell for a nosebleed, we've gone too far. One of the dancers requests a personal perfume, something hypnotic. You give her a blend so potent it once caused a small riot at a Saturnalia party. You warn her. She smiles. She'll wear it anyway. You stalk the halls, nose trailing like a trained hound. The atmosphere is starting to bloom. Warm, spiced, opulent. A perfumed breeze flows through the triclinium like a whispered secret. You nod. This is what indulgence smells like. Lit and perfumed, the house is nearly ready to welcome its guests. All that's left is chaos. It's late afternoon. The air smells of heat, roasted meats, citrus fruits, and very expensive decisions you've already made. You've assigned every task, threatened everyone necessary, and bribed the harpist to stay sober at least until dessert. Now comes the moment of truth, the final walkthrough. You start at the entrance, where the oil lamps are being lit one by one. They glow softly on polished marble, casting a golden shimmer that says, "You're not poor, at least not tonight." A florist scatters fresh petals across the threshold. You remind him not to overdo it. Last time, someone slipped on lavender and soothe in the atrium. The bronze fountains are running. Grapes are stacked in absurdly impractical pyramids. Cushions have been fluffed, beaten, and placed with symmetry. You shift one slightly to make it seem less staged. It's important that decadence look effortless, even if it took 32 hours and 2 minor breakdowns to achieve. In the next triclinium, the main event space, the tables are low, the chairs are perfectly angled, each cushion dusted, perfumed, and subtly rotated to hide wine stains from last month's senator's birthday disaster. You do a bounce test. Soft enough for comfort, firm enough for activity. You inspect the tableware. Silver goblets, bronze plates, hand-blown glass amphorae, artfully arranged bread. The cheese is sweating a little, but you decide it adds authenticity. You quietly remove a beetle from a fig. No one saw. It never happened. In the garden alcoves, the lighting is soft and ambiguous, dim enough to flatter, bright enough to avoid accidents involving potted plants and dignity. A servant fans incense. The effect is ethereal. You pause and let yourself enjoy it briefly. You notice a small detail, a flower out of place. You adjust it. Another curtain isn't quite even. You fix it, do one last check. You inhale deeply, you listen, you walk the space like a guest. It's beautiful. Ridiculous. Excessive. Perfect. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa Oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. You exhale for a moment. You let yourself believe everything is under control. Then someone bursts in. The guest of honor has arrived early and brought 3 extra wives. Of course he has. You smile tightly, straighten your tunic, and prepare to unravel the night. You snap your fingers in the center. Timing matters. If the party starts too early, it loses mystery. If too late, guests complain. You want suspense, latent scandal. You discreetly pass a serving tray, pluck a grape and stash it. You spot a guest already snoring on a cushion, another polishing a dagger with butter. So yes, this is going well. For a Roman orgy, controlled chaos is the highest praise. Tonight, you're almost insulted. The lyres are well tuned, the flutes finally sober, or at least balanced, and dancers are lubricating limbs like warriors preparing for battle. You nod as the entertainment begins. Silence falls over the triclinium as the first dancer steps forward, golden veils fluttering, ankle bracelets shimmering, eyes somewhere between divine inspiration and utter apathy. She moves gracefully, hypnotically, hitting just the right level of theatrical sensuality to make even the oldest senators feel poetic. The flute joins, slow notes spiraling like incense in the perfumed air. For a brief, beautiful moment, all chatter slows. Even the poet pauses his recitation. But then something goes off script. A guest demands a reenactment of the myth of the leader and the swan. Another replies, "No, Orpheus in the underworld, with real torches this time." A third suggests something involving naked gladiators, jugs of water, and interpretive juggling. You smile politely and assure everyone it's all part of the plan. Meanwhile, the twin mimes, who were told to wait until the third wine course, arrive early and start miming an exaggerated seduction scene involving a fig and a sausage. Half the room laughs, the other half looks confused. A man applauds as if this were Pompey's theater. You resist the urge to pour wine in his eyes. The dancers continue, the musicians try to adapt. You notice the harpist improvising something sad, probably realizing she's playing in the wrong key. Then someone throws a peach, seemingly accidental, followed by another guest tossing a fig back. Now it's interactive. You step in quickly, raise your hand, and declare it a symbolic offering to Bacchus. Everyone cheers, the crisis averted. Mental note: never serve throwable fruit again. Entertainment moves forward. Music, movement, whispers, laughter. A flame dancer performs near the pool. A flute girl stumbles. One guest proposes marriage to a statue. It's a beautiful, perfumed theatrical chaos. This is where you shine. Orgy planner, stage manager, humor wrangler, diplomat. You adjust a lamp, signal a server, slip silently through shadows as if all this were intentional. By the third course, wine is no longer served, it's worked. Guests lounge like drunken gods, blooming fully, laughing too loudly, flirting boldly, forgetting basic facts like who they are or why they came. You instructed servers to dilute strategically. Fern wine is strong. 1 amphora can coax a senator into singing poetry or confessing tax fraud. You dilute wine for the ambitious and leave it pure for the desperate. It's jar diplomacy. Conversations get less philosophical, more personal. A young patrician loudly compares his wealth to Jupiter's. A merchant boasts owning 3 villages and a camel. A pearl-wearing woman whispers a joke about the emperor's feet. You pretend not to hear. If she's exiled, you'll miss her. She's great with seating arrangements. Across the hall, a poet tries seducing a philosopher with verses suspiciously plagiarized. You pass by just in time to hear. His eyes are like dark, briny olives. You don't intervene while 2 courtesans are locked in a passive-aggressive battle of compliments. Each smile is a dagger. Every laugh carries the scent of strategic assassination. One gifts the other a fig. You make a mental note and remove all figs until dessert. Meanwhile, someone in the back starts a drinking game involving gladiator trivia. Name 3 famous jewels or take a drink. Someone shouts. A minor senator tries to bluff his way through an answer, gets booed, drinks, then softly collapses into a pillow, quoting Virgil. In the garden, a guest delivers a speech he believes profound, but is actually explaining how many slaves it takes to keep a marble fountain clean. Nobody stops him. It's tradition. The wine flows faster now. Airs open like promises. Cups never empty. Limits blur. Names are forgotten. Stories get exaggerated. The orgy approaches, and you still monitor the flow like an experienced general. You adjust the lighting, slow the music, stop a guest from drinking perfume. The orgy is heating up, scandals just beginning to bubble. At this point, the party has evolved from structured event into wild spectacle, your masterpiece of controlled chaos. The decline into absurd mythological chaos unfolded as guests abandoned their names. Senators with titles now addressed each other as Apollo, Venus, or that guy with the peacocks. Someone crafted a laurel wreath from table herbs. At the fountain, 3 figures gathered, one seemingly trying to baptize the others. You wisely decide not to ask questions. Normally, this would trigger panic among hosts, but you calmly sip wine diluted with water and start damage control in silence. The staged gladiator fight dangerously nears the Neptune mosaic. Gently, you separate them with a tray of dates as distraction. It works. Like children with tattoos, they fall for it. Suddenly, you notice 2 guests missing. Under the table, you find them debating stoicism while rubbing each other's feet. A discreet cough, a nod, and they pretend to be searching for a lost bracelet. Meanwhile, a flute girl begins to cry when asked if her instrument is in tune, misinterpreting it as a metaphor. You discreetly send the lyre, a reserved player, and a handful of pomegranate seeds to recover her in the atrium. A very large man is seducing a marble bust of Venus, whispering sweet nothings and slowly feeding it olives. You send a servant to gently turn the bust to avoid scandal. The man takes this as a challenge and begins reciting love poetry. Frankly, better than his previous grain tariff conversation. Someone knocks over a torch. You catch it before it hits the tapestry. No flinching, no sweating. You remain an immovable center amidst a storm of silk grapes and moral commitments. You walk through the room like a high priest of excess, smoothing, redirecting, with a glance that warns, "Don't throw that cup." The cup is put down. He knows better. This is your art, your chaos, and you've tamed it well, but it's not over yet. The distinct sound of someone rolling a wine cart echoes down the hallway. You take another sip. Dawn approaches. The dawn breaks with the subtlety of a fallen amphora. Sunlight spreads over marble floors, illuminating carnage, overturned cups, a sandal caught in a fruit bowl, a nobleman asleep face down in a decorative urn. Oil lamps sputter. The scent fades into something like regret. You carefully step over a fainted flautist and begin your final damage assessment. Cushions are scattered, togas draped over statues in ways that could be art or evidence someone wrote a philosophical comic in wine on the wall. It doesn't rhyme but is surprisingly insightful. You find your way to the triclinium. A pile of olives is arranged into a rudimentary image of the emperor. You consider preserving it, but instead quietly kick it under the table. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa Oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. Slaves begin the silent post-orgy cleanup ritual. Wine-stained sheets are bundled, half-eaten peacocks removed from incense ashes, swept into dignified, organized piles. You give low instructions, as if raising your voice might awaken deeper chaos. You check the guest list. Everyone accounted for. No deaths, 1 sprained ankle, and 2 spontaneous weddings. A polite note left by a departing philosopher reads simply, "Thank you. I learned things I must never speak of." You make a list titled Review. Never serve throwable fruit, no live poetry battles near open flames, keep the Venus statue stored during events. Someone groans loudly under a table. You nod in acknowledgement but offer no help. The party is over. Everyone must face their own consequences. In the garden, doves wander from the pig's explosive performance. You gently herd them to a corner, tossing leftover crystallized almonds. They deserve something sweet after the night endured. One last glance around. It was a mess, a triumph, a diplomatic nightmare draped in grapes, and you survived. You retreat to your room, kick off your sandals, collapse on your rug. No applause, no prizes, just the knowledge that no one saw the chaos because you absorbed it all. Tomorrow, stories will be told about how perfect you were. As sleep begins, a dry, bitter wind whispers over the dust-blackened plains once rich and fertile. The soil, now powder, has taken the farmers who once danced in golden wheat fields, leaving them defenseless as their land and future literally blew away. The 1930s were unforgiving. For families in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and eastern Colorado, the very earth they trusted turned enemy. The tragedy was fueled by government incentives and promises of prosperity, pushing thousands to plow native grasses that had kept the soil intact. When rains stopped in 1931, they didn't return. The drought deepened. Without roots, the topsoil lifted and was carried by wind in thick clouds. Storms arrived suddenly. Blue skies turning black, walls of dust hundreds of meters tall swallowing entire towns. Livestock suffocated, cars stalled, children developed dust pneumonia. Mothers sealed windows with wet towels and newspapers, but dust seeped in, coating plates, furniture, lungs. People called it the Dust Bowl. April 14, 1935. Black Sunday, a storm so vast some thought the world was ending. A preacher urged his congregation to prepare for judgment. The storm stretched over 200 miles, blotting out the sun and turning day into night for thousands. Realization came, they could not stay. The soil was gone, crops failed, cattle died, children coughed dirt. hope became a graveyard of dreams. Families piled into fragile vehicles, trucks and sedans, often with flat tires, more children than seats. Their belongings tied on roofs, mattresses, kettles, washboards, family heirlooms. Their destination: survival. Westward, toward California. The road was not paved in gold but in desperation. Dust storms ravaged the skies. The greatest exodus in American history began. Exploitation was the harsh reality for Dust Bowl migrants, with many forced to endure brutal working conditions and discrimination as they searched for survival. The only real sanctuary came from the federal government, through programs like the Farm Security Administration, FSA. The FSA created labor camps such as the one in Arvin, California, designed to provide decent living conditions including basic sanitation, medical care, and a sense of dignity rarely found elsewhere. Unlike the makeshift settlements scattered across California's agricultural valleys, often dirty, overcrowded, and lawless, these government camps were organized, clean, and even democratic, allowing residents to elect committees to settle disputes internally. Despite this, most migrant families lived outside the safety net, in illegal, informal communities where police harassment, violent expulsions by locals, and constant threats of displacement were everyday experiences. Authorities frequently branded these displaced families as vagrants, treating them with hostility rather than compassion. Many children were denied access to education, either because schools refused to enroll migrant children or because families were too transient to maintain consistent attendance. Others were too weak or busy helping in the fields to attend school regularly. Even in the government camps, where conditions were far better, migrants faced the daily grind of poverty and uncertainty. Yet, amid these hardships, a unique culture of resilience and solidarity emerged. Around campfires, migrants would play guitars, sing songs, and share stories. Ballads like Hard Traveling and Do Re Mi echoed their pain and perseverance, turning hardship into shared strength and community. The children of the Dust Bowl carried a burden no child should bear. Their childhoods were marked less by play and more by survival. Toys were scarce, often replaced by sticks or found objects. Dirt roads and roadside camps became their playgrounds, but these were places shadowed by hunger and fear. The Great Depression had already strained American families, but for these children, poverty was compounded by displacement, dust storms, and broken promises. They grew up not protected from the harshness of life but embedded deeply within it. Even the youngest worked alongside their parents in the fields, picking cotton, grapes, or beans for wages barely enough to buy food. Children as young as 6 suffered blistered hands and exhaustion from long hours under the scorching sun. School attendance was an elusive goal, frequently interrupted by the need to move when work dried up or landlords chased families away. When enrolled, migrant children were often stigmatized, labeled as troublemakers, and alienated by other students and sometimes teachers. Their worn, patched clothes marked them immediately as outsiders. Their accents, dusty skin, and quiet hunger separated them from classmates, who sometimes mocked or excluded them. Many schools refused to accept all migrant children. Some required them to do menial tasks, like cleaning bathrooms, before being allowed in class. Despite these challenges, these children grew tough, learning early how to care for younger siblings, carry water, repair shoes with scraps of rubber, and help stretch meager meals of beans, cornmeal, and lard. Despite their dire circumstances, moments of hope and small victories appeared. Occasionally, aid agencies brought books, soap, and makeshift school supplies to the camps, especially the government-run ones. In these rare moments, children could laugh, learn, and briefly escape the hardships of their lives. These little breaks were critical, offering a glimpse of normal childhood. For many, their memories of this time, though filled with struggle, also held warmth. Families, although poor, were tightly knit. Storytelling, music, shared work, and mutual support formed the backbone of their daily lives. Birthdays, toys, and vacations might have been luxuries they never knew, but their bonds with family and community were unbreakable. As these children grew, many carried their strength forward, becoming the first in their families to graduate high school, find stable jobs, or serve in the military during the coming World War. They were children born from dust storms and poverty, yet their stories are not just of suffering. They are stories of determination, hope, and survival against overwhelming odds. The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer are towering testaments to the power of oral tradition. They were not simply stories. They were living performances recited aloud, often accompanied by epic singers. These Homeric epics were passed down from bard to bard, memorized in their entirety. The Iliad alone contains more than 15,000 lines of verse. How could someone remember it all? The answer lies in the architecture of oral composition, formulaic language, and the repetition of epithets like rosy-fingered Dawn or swift-footed Achilles. These repeated phrases were not merely poetic flourishes. They were memory aids, embedded cues within the narrative to help the performer stay on track. This method of oral composition allowed flexibility. There were never two recitations exactly the same. A bard could expand or shorten the story depending on the audience, weaving in local heroes or emphasizing different emotional beats. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa Oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. In this way, oral tradition allowed the epics to remain relevant, reshaped by each generation even as their core stayed intact. The Homeric epics were more than entertainment. They were moral instruction, historical memory, and collective identity. Through the stories of Troy and Odysseus, the Greek audience absorbed lessons about honor, loyalty, cunning, fate, and the will of the gods. The performances bound communities together, reinforcing shared values and reminding listeners of their place in the tapestry of myth and memory. Even after the invention of writing, the works of Homer continued to be performed aloud for centuries by the Greeks. Eventually, the epics were transformed into text, but by that time they had already left their mark on Greek thought, education, and religion. They became cornerstones of classical learning, recited in schools and echoed in the works of philosophers and playwrights. The survival of Homer's tales is a triumph of the oral world. They were not carved in stone, yet lasted longer than many civilizations. They remind us that human memory, when nurtured and structured, can rival the permanence of books. Because in antiquity, reciting Homer was not just telling a story, it was keeping history alive with every breath. Long before European contact, indigenous peoples of North America built rich, complex civilizations without written language. Their stories, laws, cosmologies, and scientific knowledge were preserved entirely through oral tradition. The spoken word of these communities was not merely a method of communication. It was a sacred force. Stories were not just told. They were shared and passed down as ceremonial objects with reverence and responsibility. Each nation, whether Haudenosaunee, Lakota, Navajo, or Hopi, had its own oral system suited to its cosmology, landscape, and social structure. Creation stories explained not only how the world began but also how humans should live in it. Animal fables taught values such as respect, courage, and humility. Historical narratives preserved records of treaties, wars, migrations, and contact with outsiders. These stories were often told during winter, when families gathered in longhouses or around fire circles, reinforcing identity and kinship. Storytellers, often elders or spiritual leaders, were chosen not only for their memory but also for their integrity. Accuracy was paramount. Embellishment was not encouraged unless serving a ritual purpose. Stories followed strict patterns, sacred sequences, and proper openings. A poorly told story was not just inaccurate, it was disrespectful. Beyond myth and history, oral tradition preserved practical knowledge of indigenous fire ecology and astronomical agricultural systems. tracking and herbal medicine were passed down orally over centuries. The knowledge of when to plant, where to hunt, how to interpret the stars, or which plants heal wounds. This was not written in manuals but spoken from elder to youth, often in story, song, or ceremony form. Even diplomacy was rooted in the oral memory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, one of the world's oldest participatory organizations. Their democracies depended on the oral recitation of the Great Law of Peace, an epic constitution preserved through wampum belts and ceremonial speeches, not scrolls. When European colonists arrived, they often dismissed oral culture as inferior, failing to recognize they were encountering societies with deep intellectual and legal traditions. Today, that spoken world survives despite centuries of forced assimilation and cultural eras. Indigenous elders still pass down songs, names, and wisdom. Some tribes are revitalizing endangered languages and reviving storytelling ceremonies, knowing that when language dies, stories die too. But as long as a voice remains, memory survives, and through it, nations endure. Long before sacred books were bound in leather and placed on altars, the sacred moved through speech in nearly every major religious tradition. The earliest teachings were not written scrolls but recited by human voice, memorized and preserved by devoted followers. Oral tradition was not just a method of communication in these religions, it was the very vehicle of revelation. It led Hinduism to become one of the oldest continuous religions on earth. The fundamental texts of Hinduism were transmitted orally for centuries before being written down by Sanskrit priests known as pundits or Brahmins, who trained from childhood to memorize vast volumes of text, down to every syllable and intonation. The Vedas were not just words, they were sounds believed to contain cosmic power. Accuracy was essential. Incorrect pronunciation could distort the spiritual effect, so oral recitation was treated with precision, rhythm, and reverence. In Islam, the Quran is considered by believers the literal word of God, revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, not written but recited. Even today, millions of Muslims memorize the Quran in its entirety, a practice known as becoming a Hafiz. The tradition here is not a supplement to the text, it is central. The melodic cadence of Quranic recitation, passed from teacher to student, sustains spiritual meaning and connects listeners to centuries of uninterrupted transmission. Christianity also began as an oral tradition. Stories of Jesus, parables, early miracles were shared aloud in gatherings long before the Gospels were published. Early Christian preachers traveled village to village speaking to crowds, debating conversion. Even after the New Testament was compiled, most congregants could not read, so the faith was heard, not read. Psalms were sung, sermons preached, scriptures lived in ears before eyes. The oral tradition of Judaism forms the backbone of religious teaching. The Mishnah and Talmud, key texts of Jewish law and interpretation, were initially preserved through complex chains of oral transmission. Rabbis debated and discussed teachings aloud, often memorizing thousands of lines before anything was written. Among religions, oral tradition ensured the divine remained alive and dynamic, spoken and sung. Today believers continue these practices. Scripture is chanted, prayers recited, mantras whispered. For the faithful, the sacred is not only what is written. It is what is heard, remembered, and lives in human breath. Long before modern courts and printed legal codes, communities worldwide maintained complex law systems through oral tradition. Justice was not dispensed by reading a book, it was spoken, memorized, and enforced. Legal knowledge was living memory carried by elders, chiefs, judges, and councils who ensured that the duty of justice and punishment was remembered and respected. Gaelic law in the Brehon tradition of Ireland was entirely oral for centuries. The laws of Brian Boru were a detailed and intricate set of legal principles governing everything from land disputes to debt payments, transmitted by trained legal scholars who memorized thousands of verses and precedents. These judges carried legacies, not books. They recited decisions with precise language, referencing past rulings and using poetic forms to aid memory and preserve consistency. In sub-Saharan Africa and many societies, elders and councils depended on oral systems to administer justice. In the Igbo, Zulu, and Ashanti traditions, oral transmission was fundamental to law and governance, demonstrating how oral culture has been a backbone of human civilization across continents and ages. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa Oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. The legal matters were resolved in public meetings where testimonies were given, witnesses recounted events, and judgments were issued by consensus. The absence of writing did not mean a lack of structure. Memory was the law. The elders of the law were the archives, and the spoken word held full authority, similar to indigenous communities in North America, which used oral justice systems to resolve conflicts and maintain harmony. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy relied on condolence ceremonies and decision-making by consensus, guided by the Great Law of Peace, a constitution transmitted orally and reinforced through wampum belts, mnemonic beads. Tools and laws were often embedded in stories, myths, and metaphors that reinforced values such as reciprocity, respect, and responsibility. These oral systems were not rigid. They were adaptable, able to evolve with changing times, incorporating new realities without the need to revise written codes. This flexibility made oral law deeply rooted in community life and often more restorative than punitive. When colonial powers imposed written legal systems, many oral laws and traditions were dismissed as primitive or inferior, but they were anything but that. They were community-centered, historically informed, and designed to maintain social balance, not just impose state power. Today, some of these oral legal systems are being revived and honored in places like New Zealand and Canada. Traditional justice models are being integrated into formal systems not because they are quaint, but because they work. In oral law, justice is not something you read. It is something you hear, something you remember, and something your entire community understands. At the heart of every oral communication tradition lies the human being, the storyteller, more than just a narrator. The storyteller is an artist, a teacher, and a guardian of cultural memory. Whether standing before a royal court or sitting near a village fire, they use voice, rhythm, gesture, and emotion to transform memory into living experience. In oral societies, storytelling is not just an act. It is an art form with training, structure, and purpose. Memory is the storyteller's greatest tool, but this is not memory as most people know it. Storytellers often train from childhood, absorbing tales word for word, gesture for tone, through listening to masters for years before even telling a story themselves. Accuracy matters. Wrong details can distort a sacred myth or misrepresent a lineage. Still, flexibility is part of the craft, as a master storyteller knows how to adjust timing, tone, or content to suit different audiences, moments, or emotional atmospheres. Across cultures, performance is central. Japanese rakugo artists sit on stage with only a fan and cloth, bringing entire casts of characters to life through changes in tone, facial expression, and rhythm. In India, the Kathakali tradition combines dance, mime, and songs to retell ancient epics like the Mahabharata. In West Africa, instruments like the kora accompany recitations, turning story into melody. Narrative is thus not static. It is theater with memory as the script. The audience is never passive. Cultural storytelling is communal. Listeners sigh, laugh, and respond, knowing the tales but coming to hear them anew, because how they are told matters as much as what is told. A familiar myth can seem fresh, new, even revelatory depending on the storyteller's skill. Storytelling is not just entertainment. It is education, history, ritual, tradition, and survival. A story can teach a child which plants are poisonous, encode directions across a desert, or rules about kinship and taboo. Often the lesson is buried in metaphor, understood only with maturity. The storyteller is thus a cultural pillar. When they speak, They echo generations. They do not just remember the past, they embody it. Because in oral tradition, memory does not live in books, it lives in people, and when they speak, entire civilizations speak with them. In a world ruled by screens, algorithms, and cloud storage, it might seem oral tradition has vanished. But it has not. It is not dying, it is evolving. The digital age, far from erasing spoken heritage, has given it new platforms, new audiences, and new power. Memory, voice, and story are again central, not just in ancient rituals but in podcasts, spoken word, poetry, voice notes, and viral videos. The medium has changed, but the human impulse remains, to remember through voice. Social media ironically brought us back to something old. TikTok creators tell modern parables in 60 seconds. YouTubers revive myths and folktales for millions. Podcasts have become new campfires where people gather through headphones, not firesides, to hear stories that move, teach, or entertain. Many digital tools for indigenous and marginalized communities are now used to record elders, revive languages, and archive oral history before it is lost. Technology is also strengthening cultures. Smartphone recordings once ignored of grandparents telling ancestral stories or children learning tribal songs are shared across continents. Entire archives of oral knowledge are now stored online, searchable, and shareable. What was once locked in the memory of a single storyteller can now be accessed by thousands at the touch of a button. However, this raises important questions about what happens when oral tradition is frozen in a digital archive. Can a recorded story have the same nuance, energy, or spiritual weight as a live story? Will future generations still know how to listen, respond, and feel a story in their bones, not just their ears? The digital world gives permanence to oral tradition but also separates it from the living exchange that once defined it. A story told face-to-face carries gestures, emotion, silence, and community. It is shaped by the mood of the room, the listener's age, the hour of night. A story can still breathe in a digital archive. The answer may lie in balance. Oral tradition does not need to disappear in the face of modernity. It can blend with it. Podcasts can preserve live memory. Transmitted narrative can unite global audiences. What matters is not format but intention. Because as long as people speak and others listen orally, tradition survives, not as a relic but as a living bridge between past and future. Its next chapter is being written with voice, no longer with ink. Nestled deep in Egypt's western desert, beyond dunes rolling like waves and sun-bleached rocks shimmering under a brutal sun, lies the oasis of Siwa, a place of unlikely, ancient life and mystery surrounded on all sides by barren wasteland. Siwa is a mirage made real. Freshwater springs, groves of date palms and olive trees where there should be none. But its true claim to fame is not its beauty or isolation. It is the divine voice that once echoed from its sands. Here, on this remote outpost near the borderlands of Egypt and Libya, stood the temple of the Oracle of Ammonius, a sacred sanctuary dedicated to one of Egypt's supreme gods. Ammonius was not just a deity of the Nile. His influence spread far, merging with the sun god Ra to become Ammonius Ra, king of the gods. But the oracle at Siwa was not merely a religious outpost, it was a spiritual beacon. A place where men did not come to worship blindly but to ask questions about fate and receive answers. Unlike the colossal temples of Luxor or Karnak, the temple of Ammonius at Siwa was modest in size, built from limestone and mud bricks worn by centuries of heat and wind. Its power lay in silence and secrecy. The temple was nestled in sandstone cliffs overlooking the vast sweep of desert. It seemed less a monument than a whisper of hidden, intimate power. The Siwa oracle was said to speak through the high priest in trance or ritual ceremonies, delivering answers from Ammonius himself. Those permitted to approach the sanctuary carried questions of succession, war, and identity. Not only ordinary people but pharaohs and conquerors crossed scorching sands seeking a glimpse of their destiny. What made Siwa unique was not just its isolation but its independence. Though nominally part of Egypt, the oasis existed on its own rhythm. Its inhabitants spoke a Berber dialect, Its priests were not mere instruments of the state but fiercely guarded the oracle with autonomy. The desert itself was a barrier, both literal and spiritual. Reaching Siwa was a test of determination, but hearing the oracle's voice was to receive something few ever did, certainty from the gods, or so it was believed. The oracle at Siwa was unlike others. It did not inhabit bustling Egyptian cities or rich temples in the Nile Valley, but existed in silence, surrounded only by dunes and haunting wind. This isolation gave it mystique. People believed only in this quiet could the gods be heard. The oracle's rituals were shrouded in secrecy. The high priest acted as mouthpiece of a withdrawing deity, retreating to the inner sanctuary where only a select few could enter. The chamber, heavy with incense and guarded by thick stone walls, was where he would enter a trance-like state, his voice said to carry the weight of divine wisdom. Questions were asked quietly. Answers, once given, were obeyed without challenge. The answers themselves were often cryptic and wrapped in ambiguity yet full of meaning. Like the oracle at Delphi, the Siwa oracle rarely spoke in direct terms. Its power lay in suggestion, offering direction without dictating. The destiny, but unlike Delphi, the oracle of Siwa was deeply intertwined with Egyptian religious cosmology. It was not just a seer but a channel of a god that pilgrims and kings came from all over North Africa and beyond, enduring the relentless journey through the western desert to hear the oracle speak. Generals, merchants, tribal leaders, and even kings arrived bearing offerings of oil, incense, and gold, hoping to receive divine insights on the hardest choices of their lives. Some came seeking personal advice, others carried questions that could determine the fate of nations. The oasis itself added to the mystique. At night, the desert fell silent and impossibly dark, the sky was a blanket of stars, and the wind through the palm trees sounded almost like voices. Visitors would report dreams, visions, or sudden feelings of revelation after their visit. Whether through ritual or suggestion, the experience left a deep impression. But it wasn't only religious seekers who came. Political figures understood the oracle's value. Receiving its blessing was to claim legitimacy not only among locals but across the entire Mediterranean world. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. A prophecy from Siwa could crown a king, justify a war, or forge an empire. And soon, one man would test that very power, carrying a question no mortal had dared to ask before. Was he a god or merely a king? In 331 BC, a young conqueror entered the Egyptian desert with a crown on his head and a question in his heart. His name was Alexander of Macedon, known to history as Alexander the Great. By then, he had already defeated the Persian Empire in Egypt and was declared pharaoh. But titles were not enough. Alexander sought divine affirmation, not from men, but from the gods. So he turned to Siwa. The journey was perilous. The path from Memphis to Siwa was unmarked, winding through scorching deserts, salt flats, and shifting dunes. Greek historians wrote that Alexander and his caravan nearly got lost, saved only by miraculous signs, crows guiding their route, or perhaps divine snakes sliding over the sand. Others claimed they were led by storms, extraordinary events in such an arid land. These stories may have been embellished but reflect the mythical tone of the entire expedition. Why did Alexander risk so much to reach the temple? The answer lay in his ambition, not only to rule the known world but to become more than human. Like the pharaohs before him, Alexander wanted divine legitimacy. He believed, or wanted others to believe, that he was not merely the son of Philip of Macedon but the son of Zeus Ammon, the supreme god of both Greek and Egyptian pantheons, whose earthly voice whispered from the Siwa temple. When Alexander arrived at the oasis, He was greeted with great honor by the priests, likely well aware of his power and political reach. They granted him rare privilege inside the temple's inner sanctuary. What happened during that meeting remains a mystery. No detailed accounts exist. But Alexander emerged transformed. Later, when asked what the oracle told him, he was famously vague. Some sources suggest the oracle addressed him as the son of Zeus. Others say he received a prophecy of victory and divine favor. Whatever the truth, Alexander's behavior changed. He increasingly portrayed himself as a semi-divine figure demanding loyalty, not just as a king, but as a god in human form. The desert gave him more than an answer. It gave him a myth. And the myth asserted power to move armies, build cities, and reshape empires. The temple had spoken, and Alexander never looked back. The oracle temple of Siwa stood at a crossroads of cultures, not only geographically but spiritually. Its god Ammon had long reigned as one of the most powerful deities of Egypt, but as Greek influence spread into Egypt, Ammon underwent a transformation in the minds of the Mediterranean world. He was reborn as Zeus Ammon, a fusion of two supreme gods, Egyptian and Greek, united in the scorching desert of Siwa. This fusion was more than symbolic. It reflected a broader syncretism, the mixing of beliefs, images, and rituals that happened when empires collided. For the Greeks, Zeus was the king of gods wielding thunder. The bearded, omnipotent Ammon was, for the Egyptians, the hidden, invisible, mysterious breath behind all creation. He was often depicted with ram horns, symbols of power, truth, and divine presence. When the Greeks encountered Ammon, they recognized a familiar authority and named him Zeus Ammon. At Siwa, this blended identity carried extraordinary weight. The priests were Egyptians trained in ancient rites, but their fame reached the wider world. To Greek visitors like Alexander the Great, the oracle of Zeus Ammon was not just a divine voice but a bridge between civilizations. If Alexander could be declared son of Zeus Ammon, he could rule Greeks and Egyptians with a single divine lineage. Images followed. Coins minted during his reign began to show Alexander adorned with ram's horns, a direct reference to Zeus Ammon and his divine parentage. This was no mere stylistic flourish, it was a political message. Alexander was not only endorsed by the gods, he was one of the gods. This claim helped unify a vast empire where religion was both a tool of governance and a weapon like the sword or law. The cult of Zeus Ammon spread beyond Siwa. Temples were built or renamed in his honor across North Africa, Greece, and even parts of Asia. Pilgrims continued the trek to Siwa, drawn by the mystique of a god who was both familiar and foreign, Greek and Egyptian. The temple had become more than a sanctuary. It was a cosmic junction where empires, gods, and destinies met. In the echo of its oracle, one could hear not a single culture but a world in transformation, and in that transformation, Zeus Ammon reigned supreme. Unlike the imposing pillars of Luxor or the sprawling avenues of Karnak, the oracle temple of Siwa was modest in scale but monumental in meaning. Built on the limestone cliffs of Ori Hill, the structure blended seamlessly with the desert environment, almost as if it had emerged from the rock itself. But this was no hall of grandeur, it was a deliberate choice. The temple's power came not from its size, but from its secrecy. Approaching the temple, pilgrims would pass winding paths, narrow gates ascending to a sanctuary carved into the hill. The complex included a courtyard, a small hall, and finally the Holy of Holies, the inner chamber where the oracle's voice was said to reside. This final space was off-limits to all but the high priest and select individuals like Alexander. Its simplicity masked its sanctity. There were no grand statues or golden shrines, only silence and the invisible presence of a god. The temple's design served a purpose, to disorient and humble. Narrow corridors and sharp angles forced visitors to slow their pace, bow their heads, and move cautiously and reverently. In a desert where vastness and exposure reigned, the temple offered isolation and tranquility. Light barely entered the sanctuary, incense hung heavy in the air, echoes turned whispers into something supernatural. Scholars believe the temple may have had openings in the roof or vents to carry the priest's voice to adjacent rooms, enhancing the drama of the oracle's declarations. From the shadows, a god would speak, and listeners would feel awe, not for what they saw, but for what they heard. The architecture was not only functional. It was ritual theater. Around the temple lay other structures: priests' quarters, ritual pools, and sacred gardens fed by natural springs. Even in this arid land, Siwa was blessed with water, further fueling belief that the oasis itself was touched by divine hands. From this sacred hill, one could see dunes stretching endlessly, a reminder of the temple's isolation and importance. This was no place for crowds, but for pilgrims, prophets, and kings, a space designed not to impress the eyes, but to move the soul. And in that still enclosed chamber, the future could be whispered in stone. As centuries passed and empires changed, the oracle temple of Siwa began to fade, not into legend, but into silence. The divine breath that once stirred the desert winds ceased when the Roman Empire took root in Egypt. The oracle's prominence waned. What had once been a cosmic crossroads between gods and kings became a relic of a dying world. There was no single moment the oracle went silent. It was a slow unwinding. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his generals fought bitterly over his empire, and the political unity that had lent prestige to the temple dissolved. Although Zeus Ammon continued to be worshipped, pilgrimage lost its magnetic pull, shifting back toward the Nile Valley and cities like Alexandria, where philosophy and science began to replace faith. The rise of Rome brought new gods, new laws, and new priorities. Roman emperors paid lip service to Egyptian cults, but the empire's centralized bureaucratic religion left little room for the obscure ambiguity of oracle shrines like Siwa's. They were increasingly seen as quaint relics of a mythical past, respected but no longer consulted for matters of state. Then came Christianity, spreading throughout Egypt, and the ancient mysteries of Siwa slowly disappeared into the shadows of history. The ancient oracle of Siwa was one of the most mysterious and powerful oracles in the ancient world. Situated deep within the Egyptian desert, this sacred site attracted kings, conquerors, and seekers of truth from faraway lands. Among the most famous visitors was Alexander the Great, who undertook a perilous journey across harsh desert landscapes to receive its prophecy. The temple was dedicated to the god Ammonius, whose priests were known for delivering cryptic messages believed to hold divine wisdom. The oracle was not just a place of religious importance, but also a center where political legitimacy was conferred. For centuries, rulers sought its guidance to secure their power and confirm their destiny. However, as empires rose and fell and new religious beliefs emerged, the oracle's voice gradually faded, swallowed by the sands and silence of the desert. The legend of Siwa continued to live on throughout history despite its decline. During the Middle Ages, travelers whispered tales of the oasis as a place filled with magic and mystery, although few dared to venture into its remote location. The temple itself slowly crumbled under the relentless desert sun, its stone blocks scattered and forgotten. It was not until the age of exploration that European explorers and archaeologists rediscovered Siwa. Driven by curiosity and a passion for uncovering ancient secrets, they began piecing together the temple's past. Excavations revealed inscriptions and artifacts that confirmed its role as a sacred site where divine words influenced the fate of nations. The rediscovery rekindled interest in the oracle's power and its place in the ancient world's spiritual and political landscape. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure. Today, the ruins of the Temple of Ammonius stand as a shadow of their former glory. Archaeological digs have uncovered walls, altars, and carved inscriptions, which reveal the temple's significance in ancient Egyptian religious life. Unlike the grand temples along the Nile, the Siwa sanctuary was modest in scale but held extraordinary spiritual importance. Located on a hill overlooking the oasis, it provided priests with a panoramic view of the desert and sky, allowing them to integrate natural elements into their rituals. The temple was where the mortal world met the divine, a place where kings received legitimacy and common people sought hope and guidance. This unique blend of political power and spiritual influence made Siwa a fascinating chapter in the history of Egypt and the Mediterranean region. One of the most famous stories associated with Siwa is Alexander the Great's visit. According to historical accounts, the oracle declared Alexander the son of Ammonius, effectively endorsing his divine status. This blessing had a profound impact on Alexander's ambitions, legitimizing his conquest of Egypt and strengthening his claim as a ruler favored by the gods. Whether the prophecy was genuine or a carefully crafted political message, it inspired awe and reverence among his followers and enemies alike. The image of a mighty conqueror standing in the heart of the desert, receiving the approval of a god, has become an enduring symbol of ambition and destiny. The silent ruins of Siwa continue to echo this powerful story, reminding us of humanity's timeless desire to connect with something greater than itself. In the present day, Siwa remains a remote and tranquil oasis far removed from Egypt's bustling cities and tourist centers. Its residents preserve traditions passed down through generations, speaking the distinct Siwi language and maintaining cultural practices that blend ancient heritage with modern influences. Visitors to Siwa can explore the temple ruins, walk across vast salt flats, and experience natural springs that once sustained the priests of Ammonius. The silence that envelopes the site invites reflection, a reminder that some mysteries resist full explanation. While the oracle no longer speaks, the questions it raised about power, fate, and the divine continue to resonate with those who come seeking answers. Siwa's legacy is a testament to the enduring human fascination with prophecy and the unknown. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of the Siwa Oracle, don't forget to subscribe right now so you never miss any of our fascinating explorations. Here, you'll discover unique stories, surprising facts, and secrets that few know, all explained clearly and excitingly. Hit the bell to get notified instantly and join a community that loves deep knowledge and mystery. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us what topic you want us to cover next. Your support is what makes it possible for us to keep creating high-quality content just for you. See you on the next adventure.